Okay, so in this example, we're accountants for the ABC Sales Company. Management wants a simple way to look up sales data per area for a particular employee for June, July, and August. Now we're taking over this file from a previous accountant, and he used VLOOKUP. What we have is we have our tabs with June, July, and August data, and then the June, July, and August tabs here are just a pivot table of their respective months. Then we have our reporting page. On the reporting page we have this hidden portion, which from here there's data validation, which just pulls from the list that's generated right here, and the location also pulls from the different locations we have in our list here. This right here is our output for management. Now this cell is the one we're most concerned with. This is where we're going to put the formula that we're going to be using to present our data to management. Now this is the formula that we have in cell F12. We just printed it out here so we can see it. What we have is a VLOOKUP inside of a VLOOKUP. What we're going to do next is examine the different segments that come inside of the VLOOKUP. Now each of these segments in the function, there's a part that is color coded that represents the different parts. So this lookup value is F5. We're looking up Kelly Slater. And then we're going to look up the Kelly Slater over in this table, which is in the June tab, A4 to P26. So that's anywhere from this data right here down to P26 and so forth. We're going to look up and know which row we're looking at because we're looking for the row that says Kelly Slater. That's basically what's being done here with the lookup value in the table array. We know which column we're looking up, because in this function what it's doing is it's saying take whatever is in cell F8, which in this case is grand total, and grab from this list the number that's next to it, so number 10. So it's going to tell us to come over here to the June column and grab whatever's the 10th column over, and that's the grand total. So it's going to grab this number right here. This 10,000 is the same number that we end up with over in our reporting page, and that's where the number is coming from. The biggest weakness, however, with this formula is that it doesn't allow for any new locations to be added. In fact, the formula as it's written right now actually has an error here in the August month, and that's because if we go to July, July verifies with the 8,900 for Kelly Slater, grand total right there. However, in August, Kelly Slater's grand total is 11,100, but we're getting the 100 figure that's next to it. That's what's being spit out in our output here for 100. What we're going to do is we're going to need to look for a formula which can pull the name of the column and match it to the correct lookup value, and that's something that the index and match function can help us out with. So in just a minute we're going to look at what the index and match function looks like. Okay, so here's our index match function. This is what we will have typed in to the correct cells when we are all finished. I just want to compare it to the VLOOKUP. It's somewhat similar. We have the array is actually the exact same as it was up there in the VLOOKUP, but then after the array comes the row number. The row number, we're actually going to insert an entirely separate function called the match function. Now here in the match function, it has different segments within its own function, and we're going to have the lookup value, which in this case is the F5. That's Kelly Slater's name in cell F5 right here. We're going to look up that value. Then we're going to find Kelly Slater's name in the array, and then this time the array is just going to be the column in which we would find his name. So if we come over here to June, we're just looking up this in column A down to A26. So that tells us how many rows down that we're going to go in this column A. Then the next step in that pretty much wraps up the row number. We know what row we're going to be using because we're going to grab the row in which Kelly Slater's name is in that row. Next, we're going to look up a certain column, and the column also is going to have a match function, and if you break down the match function, we're going to look up there in cell F8. If you look up in cell F8, that is going to be grand total. So rather than relying on this list over here in C and D column to say, oh, if it's grand total we're looking for, grab the 10th column, what we'll do is similar to the way we grab the actual name of Kelly Slater in a VLOOKUP, we're also going to grab the actual name of however many far columns over it is inside of our array. So if we go back over to the match function, as we sidetrack a little bit, the lookup value again is we're looking up where it says grand total here in F8, right here. And where we're going to look for it is in the array. Now the array is over here, and this time the array goes from A4 to P4. So basically we're going to look in A4 to P4 of wherever it says grand total, that's where we'll go. This way we don't rely on counting how many columns over it is, and we can grab the correct value, which is the 10,000. Now, and then the 0 is just to make it an absolute match, sort of like we have the false up here in VLOOKUP. If we actually enter this formula, we're no longer going to have an error in August, because in August it's not just going to come over here and count the 10th row over, but rather, or excuse me, column over, but rather it's going to count however many columns over it needs until it finds the word grand total, and then it's going to grab the data which is in that column. And that's the correct way to pull the information here so that we do not have an error in August. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this function as it's written into the correct cells up here. Now, we've eliminated the error in the August cell, as we have the index and match function that is properly pulling the correct columns from this report. That way, if you have your company adds a new area or a new location where they're doing business, it's not going to mess up the formulas that you already have in place for reporting to management. Now this actually happened when I was working at Unicity International. Is we had a report that was thrown off by over $1 million just because of this exact problem, where we had been using a VLOOKUP to pull information out of a pivot table, and without thinking to update our formulas on this page, what we had is the pivot table had an extra market where we started doing business. It was pulling, France was pulling from Fiji, Hawaii was pulling from France, etc. and so forth. But if we actually substitute out the index and match function, that's a little bit better than the VLOOKUP, and we're not going to have those same orders or same mistakes when we report to management.